everybody, JC here from Toy News International, and I'm trying something a little different this week for YouTube. I'm kicking off a new segment that I'm tentatively going to call Poptalk, and the idea behind this segment is basically I want to take some of the headlines from the week in the world of pop culture and just kind of relay it to you in case you're not up to date, and then just give you some of my insight or opinions on it. Other things I'd like to try and do with this segment is maybe, give some shout outs to fellow YouTubers. Other things I would like to maybe do is have you guys send in things like your artwork. I've seen like with Shartimus Prime's P.O. Box pickup videos where people will mail him artwork and stuff and he shows it off. And that kind of reminded me of back in the day when I used to read like Wizard magazine, and people would send in their artwork to Wizard and they'd publish it in their magazines. And that was something that I really liked. I'm not a great artist by any means, but I do like to, or at least used to, like to try and draw a bit. And so, I like looking at other people's artwork and stuff. So, like, for instance, like, this is a piece I did back in high school. I called this character the Assassin. And basically you can see maybe a little bit of influence from characters like Deadpool or Snake Eyes. This was something I did back in the 90s. And it's by no means great or anything, but like I said, I just like to see artwork like that. So whether you email it in or maybe I'll open up a P.O. box and have you guys send in stuff, but that stuff like that. So just kind of want to interact more with the readers and the fans out there. Obviously I'm fairly new to YouTube itself. I started and run websites like Toy News International, MarvelousNews.com, Jedi Insider, T-Formers, and I've been doing that for well over 10 years now. But you don't quite get the interaction with the fans and the readers and stuff like I see on YouTube and stuff. So just kind of want to give my opinions on some things, and then I'd like to hear your comments as well. So anyway, this week I picked a couple headlines from the world of pop culture. The first one I wanted to talk about comes from the world of comic books, and you may or may not have heard about this, but basically I want to talk about the controversial Batgirl number 41 variant cover, which depicts the Joker holding a tortured Batgirl. And basically this was a cover, this is a variant cover, so it really has nothing to do with the actual story in the comic book itself. And it was done by an artist named Raphael, so I'm totally mispronouncing his last name, but basically he did this cover as a tribute to the Killing Joke graphic novel, which was done by Alan Moore and Brian Bolland back in 1988. And that's the basically classic story where the Joker takes Barbara Gordon, aka Batgirl, and ends up breaking her back and putting her in a wheelchair. And there was also, it was more violence than that. There was some indications that, there was sexual violence, that the Joker did some sexual violence to her as well and stuff. So, it is definitely a very violent story, but yet at the same time, it was a very well-received story by fans back in the day, considered pretty much a classic story. But even the story itself has had criticisms over the years about being too violent and things like that. And even the author, Alan Moore, has come out and said in past interviews that he wished that he had kind of been reined in a little bit on the violence that was depicted towards Barbara Gordon. So anyway, the controversy for this variant cover is that basically there were people who felt that it depicted and glorified, violence, physical violence towards women, sexual violence, that type of thing. And so in consideration of those people who were somewhat upset about that, the artist himself asked DC Comics to basically not publish this cover. And DC Comics abided him. And so the variant cover will not actually see release where you can go out and buy it. Now, that doesn't mean that the cover is not still out there. I mean, here it is. You can see it yourself. It's all over the internet. So it's not like you can't still view it, but because of that, because it was basically the artist asked it not to be published and DC Comics abided and everything, that in turn caused controversy. It's restricting artistic freedoms and that type of thing. And people who are complaining about the cover don't understand that it's a tribute to the Killing Joke graphic novel and such. And so I think there are legitimate points to be made on both sides of this argument. But when it comes down to, I think what we have to keep in mind is that this really isn't censorship. This is the artist deciding to take into account the feelings of people who maybe have gone through something very tragic like rape or physical violence, and being considerate of those people's feelings. Basically, obviously, when he created the cover, he didn't think about that, and now he is, and so he didn't want it to have it published. And I think that's a realistic claim. Even if it, obviously it was meant as a tribute. It wasn't meant to glorify physical violence. It wasn't meant to, in any way like that. It was meant to be a tribute to that classic story. But at the same time, I think people need to realize that, regardless of that fact, even if you are aware of that story or whether you're not aware of that story, if you're someone who has been exposed to that kind of physical violence, whether personally or somebody who has, then seeing a cover like this could be, horrifying, not just offensive, but horrifying. And so I think there's something to be said to be, taking those people's feelings into consideration. And I don't think we should fault the artists or DC Comics for trying to do that. Now, I understand the counter-argument that, where do you draw the line, with the censorship, does this mean we can no longer see stories like The Killing Joke ever done again? And the answer is, I don't think so. I mean, obviously there's a time and place for everything like that, and, obviously the Killing Joke graphic novel is not one that young kids should be reading. Parents shouldn't be letting their kids read that or buy that, and maybe even some kind of notification on a comic like that, letting people make sure that people are aware of the violence that's contained in issues like that. But I don't think it means that companies can no longer do stories like that or even artwork like that, though I'm not sure it's necessarily fitting for the cover of a major, comic book title. But again, I do understand that the people were upset about it not being published. But I think if you think about, or if you knew if you had a friend who had gone through physical violence like that, would you want them to be subjected, or a loved one, a family member, anybody along those lines? Would you, regardless of whether it's a tribute to a story, a classic story or not, would you want them to have to see something like that? And I think if we're honestly, being honest with ourselves, I think the answer would be no, I wouldn't. If they're really a friend of yours or somebody you care about, you wouldn't want them to have to go through something like that. So that's where I stand. Now, one thing I do want to comment, and I see this come up a lot of times with these stories in the comic book world. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in other fandoms and stuff, but that death threats have been laid out. And I think what it was is that people were making death threats against those who were complaining about the issue being not, wanting it to be pulled, and there weren't actual death threats made against the artist or the writer or anything like that. But I have seen in previous stories, like I recall, Dan Slott, who writes Spider-Man, was getting death threats for because he had killed off Peter Parker when they did the Superior Spider-Man story, and just things like that. You know what? If you've got to resort to making death threats over anything related to comic books or toys or anything along those lines, then you're an idiot. Okay, you're just flat out, you're a goddamn idiot. Whether you're making it in jest or not, whether you think you're safe behind a keyboard or not, if you're resorting to threatening somebody's life with some kind of physical violence of your own in any shape or form, you're an idiot and your opinion really doesn't mean squat. I'm sorry, but that's just beyond ridiculousness. If you're doing something like that, I hope you're smart enough to know that it's not cool to do that, even if you don't mean it. Even if you're angry and you're just typing to say, it's just not cool. So I really hope that people think twice before they make any kind of threat of any kind of violence over something like this. I can understand having an opinion. I can understand even being upset, but think twice before you make some kind of statement that involves physical violence or death threats or something, because that's just, like I said, beyond ridiculousness, and you've got far bigger issues you probably need to deal with than a comic book cover being pulled or a toy not being released or whatever. Okay, so while we're on the subject of DC Comics, I just wanted to talk about the latest episode of The Flash, which premiered on the CW this week, called Out of Time. The episode's called Out of Time. Now, if you haven't seen that episode, I am going to reveal some spoilers, so you might want to fast forward a couple minutes of this segment. But first of all, I just want to say I love The Flash and Arrow. I think they're probably two of the best TV shows on TV right now. Not just superhero shows, but just in general. I think they're really great. I'm kind of one of those people who've not been a huge fan of recent DC movies like Man of Steel. I wasn't a huge fan of the Man of Steel movie. Even the last Batman movie wasn't that great. Green Lantern was horrible. But DC has really been hitting it out of the park with their TV shows. Even Gotham and Constantine, I think, are pretty good shows. Not as good as Arrow and Green Arrow, or Flash and Green Arrow, but definitely I think they've been hitting it out of the park with their TV shows, more so than Marvel. But that's a debate for another time. But anyway, so this week's episode, a lot of things kind of happened, but then didn't really happen, thanks to the end of the episode twist. So, basically, and here come the spoilers. So again, if you haven't seen the episode, fast forward. But basically, what ends up happening is the Flash ends up taking on the Weather Wizard. I forget the guy's real name, but he's coming back to get revenge, and the Flash has to stop him. But meanwhile, Cisco decides to investigate Dr. Wells' activities and how the Reverse Flash managed to get out of the force field containment trap that they had set a couple episodes ago for him. And he discovers basically, Cisco basically discovers Wells' secret that he's the Reverse Flash. And so Wells confronts him and in fact ends up killing Cisco because he can't let the secret get out. And other big revelations in the episode is Barry lets Iris know that he's the Flash. And so a lot of big reveals in this episode, a lot of big things. But then, of course, at the end, Barry manages to break the time barrier and ends up jumping back in time to earlier in the episode. And so basically all that stuff, I guess, is, for now at least, kind of out the window. So kind of an interesting twist. And, it's going to be interesting to see where they go with the episode or where they go with the story. I gotta say, I'm a little bummed. I really like the Harrison Wells character, and I'm going to be bummed when they finally reveal him to everybody to be the bad guy, and he ends up becoming the bad guy as opposed to the mentor. And I think he's a more interesting good guy than he is a bad guy. So I'm definitely going to be a little sad when they actually reveal him to everyone to be the bad guy. But I'd love to hear your opinions on the episode, what you think about the series in general. Do you watch Flash and Arrow? I have not seen this week's episode of Arrow yet. I missed it last night, and I got to catch it on demand. But that's another show that I think is really good. will the Arrow become the new Ra's al Ghul? I guess I'll have to tune in and find out. But and do you like Constantine? That one's probably the weakest of the four D shows on the air right now. But still, I think it's pretty good. It could maybe use a little bit more connection with the rest of the DC universe to make it a little more interesting. But overall, I like that show. I hope it doesn't end up getting canceled. I know there was rumors that it was on the chopping block, but then they moved it to a different time, and I haven't heard whether it's if it's still being slated for cancellation or not. But and then Gotham I think is pretty good. It's not it's not quite the same as the others. It's more focused on Gordon and less on the villains as opposed to like Batman. But I think that's been a pretty interesting show as well. So, definitely like to hear your thoughts on Flash and the latest episode if you've caught it and where you think the show's going. Okay, so the next headline that I wanted to talk about comes from the world of video games. And Nintendo has announced that they're going to be doing a new system that's right now codenamed the NX. Some people speculated that it might be called the Nintendo Next, which would be kind of corny, but certainly no more corny than the Wii, I guess. So, and basically they announced that they're going to be doing this new system because they also announced that they're going to start doing Nintendo games for smartphones, and they wanted to assure people that they're not giving up the consoles that with smartphone games essentially. And so we have no idea whether this new system's going to be just a continuation of the Wii U, which apparently has not had very strong sales, or if they're going to try and start competing more directly with like Xbox and PlayStation with graphics and stuff, and be more powerful than those machines. It's really unknown at this time what this new machine is going to entail. But they did announce that they were going to be doing a new machine, and more details would be coming, I think, next year. And then, as I said, they're going to be doing games, most likely classic Nintendo games for the smartphone. So Mario, probably get Super Mario. Frankly, I really hope that we finally get a true to form arcade version of Donkey Kong. I don't know what it is. I mean, that's like one of their most classic games, and yet I don't think they've ever released a home version that is true to the actual arcade. I think the last time they released Donkey Kong was for the original Nintendo console, and that was missing levels and was just it wasn't a true adaptation of the arcade game. And most pretty much all the home versions that I've seen are not true adaptations because they're missing a level, or they don't have the graphics in between the scenes and stuff, and the sounds and stuff like that. So I really would love to see Nintendo, preferably on something that has a joystick. I don't really like touchpads, especially for a game like Donkey Kong. But I would like and hope that they release one of the games they do is Donkey Kong. But I'm sure we'll also see things like Zelda and Super Mario and things like that with this new announcement for the smartphone games. So just wanted to touch on that, let you know that Nintendo is coming out with a new system. Again, love to hear from you. What system do you play most? Do you have a Wii U? I just have the Wii, as I said. That was the last Nintendo system I bought, and I don't play it that often. But then again, I don't play video games that much anymore anyway, so I'm not a huge gamer. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, what you think, what you'd like to see from Nintendo, so on and so forth. Okay, so the final headline that I chose to talk about this week does center around the world of toys. Not a specific toy, but basically the news that came up this week that Toys R Us is going to be not closing, most likely, but moving their flagship store, which is located in Times Square in New York City. Now I don't know if you've ever been to that store. I usually go to New York City twice a year, once for Toy Fair and then again for New York Comic Con in October. And I usually try and make a point to go into the Toys R Us just to see what they have. And I've got to be honest with you, pretty much every time I go in there, I'm disappointed. The very first time I went in there, it was cool to see the working Ferris wheel that kids can actually ride, the life-size T-Rex that stands in the action figure department. You know, that was kind of cool to see, and I'm sure if you're a young kid, I mean, that's really incredible to see. So it's a great tourist attraction if you've never been in there. But purely from the standpoint of a consumer going in to buy toys, you know, this store has never done anything for me. They never have anything more in stock than what I can find at my Toys R Us down the street, which usually isn't much, unfortunately. It's the same kind of stuff, the same kind of peg-warming stuff. It's just more of it, basically. So, you know, to me, the fact that even if the store just totally closed, it wouldn't be that big of a loss. In fact, I think it would be better for them. I mean, they open the store for PR purposes, basically. They do big announcements and things like that. And, you know, whenever you see Times Square on TV, you always see the Toys R Us building and stuff. So, you know, that was the purpose of the store from the get-go. But basically what's happened is that their lease is going to be is expiring here soon. And the rent on the place is basically going to go up. So the building itself is 110,000 square foot, and it's basically 3 floors. Again, if you've never been in there, and so the new rent, based on the articles that are out there, are basically saying that for the main floor, which is about 1,500 square feet, is going to cost about $2,500 per square foot. And then the ground floor, which is not as much on that floor. I think that I want to say that's the floor where they like sell candy and stuff like that. That one's going to be $150 per square foot. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's the lower level, and then the upper level is going to be $350 per square foot. So basically what it boils down to is if they wanted to renew their lease on that place, they would have to pay over double of what they originally paid when they signed the lease back in 2000. And so it's kind of a no-brainer that you're going to not renew their lease because it's just not worth the money to them. The PR of it, I couldn't see being worth that kind of cost. You know, especially, you know, in this day and age with struggling toy sales and stuff. So anyway, Toys R Us is now a privately owned company. Basically, a number of investors, including a company called Vornado, basically came in and invested money in Toys R Us, which basically means they have part ownership in the company. And so what it looks like is going to happen is Toys R Us is going to move that flagship store simply down the street and to a new location, the Marriott Marquis, which is owned by the realty company, you know, owned by Vornado. So basically, I'm sure they're going to get a deal on the rent, and it's going to save money and stuff. So, you know, they're moving. Basically, their current address is 1514 Broadway, and they'd be moving down to 1535 Broadway, if the rumors are true. Now, keep in mind, this is all rumor. Toys R Us has not said specifically that they're not renewing their lease, so it's certainly possible that they could end up renewing it and staying where they are. But you know, I've seen a lot of articles depicting Toys R Us as closing their flagship store, and it's not the case. They're not closing it. They're just moving it, if that even happens at all. And they're moving it because the rent basically went up to an astronomical amount, and they're going to move to someplace where it's less expensive. I don't know what the square footage is on the new place. It may be a little bit smaller, but certainly could still easily serve the purposes of PR, which is what this current store does. So not a major thing. In fact, I think it would be a good thing. I think they could find better ways to spend that money improving their regular stores, getting more product out, so when you go in, it's not just the same peg warming stuff. What have better marketing, just there are just so many better ways I think they could put that money to better use. So for me, I think it's a good thing if this happens. Okay, so that's it for the headlines of today, or this week. I won't guarantee that I'll do this every week. A little bit will depend on how interested you all seem to be in seeing more of this kind of thing. Like I said, it's just kind of me rambling about my thoughts on the week's news. So how interested you are in that, I really couldn't say. But I wanted to try it out. Like I said, I also want to start doing things like shout outs. So for this week, I'm going to make it easy and just, if you haven't already, check out Pixel Dan's channel, and there's a link in the description below. He does great Masters of the Universe, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles reviews. Shartimus Prime, great for his Marvel Legends reviews. He's Pacific Rim, things like that. Sean Long, check his out. Great for Hot Toys reviews and things like that. All great guys. And you're probably already following those guys. They have far more subscribers than I do. But if you haven't already, check them out. There's links in the descriptions below. And like I said, if you've got a YouTube channel that you think is pop culture related that I think I'd be interested in checking out, then let me know about it. Check me out on Facebook. There's a link in the description for my Facebook page. There's a link to my Twitter account, and or contact me here on YouTube or Google Plus. Real quick, just to let you know, this coming Wednesday. Today I'm recording this on Thursday, and so the following Wednesday. What is today's date? Today's the 19th. So this coming up Wednesday is going to be finally the release of that DC Collectibles Deluxe Clayface figure. It's going to be hitting comic and specialty shops this coming Wednesday. We're definitely going to be doing a review, or I'm going to be doing a review of that figure on Wednesday. So if you're interested in checking that out, be sure to check back then. And like I said, I know a lot of you have asked me when that figure is coming out, and so it is finally going to hit comic and specialty shops this coming Wednesday. All right, and so until next time, I'll catch you guys later.